Welcome, I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. U.S. Presidential Envoy Steve Witkoff will lead a delegation to Egypt to join Gaza's ceasefire and hostage talks, according to Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati, as Qatar's Prime Minister and Turkish delegates will also participate in the third day of negotiations on the indirect talks between Hamas and Israeli representatives. Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg has claimed that she was kidnapped and tortured by Israeli forces after being detained with 478 others from the Global Smooth Flotilla, which attempted to deliver aid to Gaza, according to statements made at a press conference. Meanwhile, according to UN reports, Israeli shelling in Gaza continues despite U.S. calls for a pause during ongoing ceasefire negotiations in Qatar. Russian President Vladimir Putin has claimed on his 73rd birthday that Russian forces have captured nearly 5,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory in 2025. While a top Russian commander said troops are advancing in all directions, however, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has dismissed the claims and pointed to gains in Donetsk. 3 people were killed and 1 injured in a Ukrainian missile strike on Maslova Pristan in Russia's Belgorod region, Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov has said, with rescue teams, according to clear rubble that may still have trapped victims. The attack damaged a sports center near the Ukraine border, and Ukraine has not commented on this incident yet. U.S. President Donald Trump's threat to invoke the Insurrection Act to deploy military forces in Democratic-led cities has escalated tensions, with Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker accusing him of using troops as a political weapon. Legal battles have emerged over National Guard deployments, and a federal judge temporarily blocked a troop presence. Turkey will shift to increase domestic gas production and U.S. LNG imports to cover over half of its gas needs by 2028, which threatens to shrink Russia and Iran's one-off lost major energy market. U.S. President Donald Trump has pressured Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to cut energy ties with Moscow and Tehran. The European Commission has announced a $1.1 billion plan to boost artificial intelligence in key industries, aiming to reduce the EU's dependence on foreign technologies. This initiative follows the April Action Plan to ease regulatory burdens on startups under new AI laws that took effect in August last year, marking a significant push. Now we have a breaking news. TTP terrorists have ambushed a Pakistani military convoy near the Afghan border, killing 11 Pakistani soldiers, army soldiers from the 216 wing. The ambush took place in central Kurram in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Several soldiers have been injured and are missing. This comes as in recent months reports of the Pakistani Taliban's attacks on Pakistani security forces have surfaced. Now we move on. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has warned that Russia is seeking to sow discord within Europe through a campaign of drone incidents and airspace violation. She has said that Europe is facing a new kind of conflict, what she calls hybrid warfare. And she has said that tackling this hybrid threat requires more than just traditional defense measures. Let's listen into what she has said.
This is part of a worrisome pattern of growing threats. Across our Union, undersea cables have been cut, airports and logistic hubs paralyzed by cyber attacks, and elections targeted by malign influence campaign. These incidents are calculated to linger in the twilight of deniability. This is not random harassment. It is a coherent, and escalating campaign to unsettle our citizens, test our resolve, divide our union, and weaken our support for Ukraine. And it is time to call it by its name. This is hybrid warfare, and we have to take it very serious. Tackling Russia's hybrid war is not only about traditional defense. It is about software for drones. It is about spare parts for pipelines. It is about rapid cyber response teams. And it is about public information campaigns to spread awareness. So this requires a completely new mindset for all of us. We must be ready to leave our comfort zone. We need to explore new ways of doing things. And most importantly, we must deter everyone who seeks to harm our territory and our people. The choice before us is very simple. We either can shy away and watch Russian threats escalate, or we meet them with unity, deterrence, and resolve.
Now for this discussion, we're joined by Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how do you see this Russia-Ukraine war reshaping Europe's security architecture after hearing the EU chief speak?
Asuma, good to be with you. I find it rather ironic. On one level, it could be said, yes, what she's saying, some of that, of course, is true. But considering the EU has been beginning to clamp down on free speech and restrict internet, what is said on the internet for the citizens of EU, it is another subject, but that needs to be looked at along with her previous comments in regard to her behaviour in regard to the whole COVID debacle. The reason why I say this is that there is no doubt that Russia has been sending the drones over. It is testing. It is testing. And one of the easiest things to do is to send planes up or other drones and destroy whatever is coming in to Poland or in Denmark and elsewhere. And when you are in this sort of pre-potential escalation of war, you're probing what the enemy's defense is. You can then argue that that is what Russia is doing, as I've said previously. When Russia sends drones over, then you are then taking your eyes off the Ukraine. Then Europe has to say, well, we need to strengthen our NATO resources in this country, say Poland, defensive wise. So that is what we then have to look at, and then it takes the eye off Ukraine. So what she's saying is then right, but what they need to do is take that action. They come in, whatever as a object has come in, unidentified, into a NATO country, into an EU country, then those objects have to be shot down, period. Then that's done, because there is no doubt about it. There is this probing, there is this testing. It has to be met with strength. Asuma.
And Mark, now, as you've also mentioned that now Europe is moving, and now from what we see that Europe is moving from a peace-centric identity to rearmament and hard power investments. How should the EU and NATO define their roles to remain effective and coordinated in this new world order that's emerging?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, the last thing that anyone wants is war. That's the last thing that we want, and we can reflect on for many, many hours on what has gone on over the last 4 years, what happened under the Biden regime, how much was genuine negotiation in regard to trying to stop this from a European point of view. And we've also had in the first Trump administration, and now we have that in Trump too, which is turning around and saying how much of the European GDP is actually spent on defense. You can't keep relying on the Americans, and we can't. In many ways, I'll turn around and say, why should we? we need, why should they, be in this position? We need to be strengthening that. That's all been part of this discussion over the last 4-6 years and longer. The other thing is people need to go back, and in 1994, when we turn around to the Ukraine, you get rid of your nuclear weapons, and we'll then stand by you and defend you. There's looking at the history of why we are at this point. We can't go back. We can't keep going down those rabbit holes. Now we're in a position where people are turning around and saying, well, we've got to then rearm, as you've said. We've now got to boost our defences at a time when the European economies are really in a very, very on their backs in many ways, in an awful position. So then it's turning around saying, where is that money coming from? What sacrifices then have to be made by individual European countries? We've had this peace dividend for a long time, and whether we haven't got time to go through the history of the Second World War, Cold War, and then what happened after that and how that evolved. We look at how the wall came down in 1989, and then look where we are now. The defences do have to be taken seriously. But the last thing I know I want on a personal level, and many other people in this world, we don't want a third world. We don't want a third world war. And then it's dragging Putin, Zelensky to the table to say this has to stop. But there seems to be that isn't happening at the moment. And if not, things are escalating in so many different ways. When van der Leyen talks about the hybrid attacks, there is a long list, and it's real. Asuma.
Thank you, Mark, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic. Now, tensions escalate between Ukraine and Russia as both sides launched attacks, resulting in at least 5 deaths. In Russia's Belgorod region near the border, a missile strike hit the village of Maslova, Pristan, killing 3 people and damaging a social facility. According to the local governor, meanwhile, in southern Ukraine, a Russian strike on the city of Kherson has killed an elderly couple. Ukraine reports that Russia has launched over 180 drones overnight, while Russia claims to have intercepted more than 50 Ukrainian drones, mostly near Belgorod. Both sides deny targeting civilians. Kyiv has said that its retaliatory strikes on Russian energy infrastructure are a response to ongoing Russian attacks that have left millions of Ukrainians without heating or power. Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry has said that Russian army has captured Novorihorivka in Ukraine's Zaporizhia region. Now, for this discussion, we go back to Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you, Mark, for staying with us. Now, with this escalation going from both sides, last week we saw the confirmation that Ukraine used that domestically made missiles in recent strikes on Russian infrastructure. How do you see what is this reflecting, and how do you see Ukraine's growing self-reliance? And in our earlier discussion, we were just talking about Europe realizing that they have to be self-reliant. Do you think this was similar move by Ukraine, suggesting that we are becoming growing self-reliant?
There's also, you and I have even discussed this with this whole thing of moving Tomahawk missiles from America that are being bought to then put into this theatre of war. What will then happen? Will they be used? Who is then overseeing that? What permission do they have in regard to looking at the Russian targets? That is then moving in. It talks about this whole escalation. The other interesting thing, and a problem within the UK, when they talk about when Prime Minister Starmer has talked about expending, the GDP in regard to spending on defence, we will have 5% maybe by another 3-4 years, and then it leads into another government. And then you argue that this is not enough and this is not fast enough. And like with the UK and other European countries, are they then in a position to then really turn on the pipeline into producing ammunition, etc., and other equipment fast enough? I don't think a number of countries are in that position, particularly within the UK, and that logistically is being looked at. Asuma, what is happening, in my humble opinion, is because of the Russian actions, because of the aggression, the European countries are really, really looking at this seriously. You and I have discussed this in regard, and it's constantly out there in regard to the frozen Russian assets in banks, and actually looking at grabbing that and looking at using that money to rebuild Ukraine, or even purchase of armaments or whatever it needs to then defend Ukraine. All of this is up in the air. What it has done is to get European leaders to really to begin to focus, as you've said, from a peace dividend to turning around and going, we now have to look at our own defense, because this war, what is happening within these appalling circumstances, is continuing. Assuming.
Yes. And as you've mentioned, the Russian, frozen Russian assets, given Russia's warnings of legal retaliation and its claims of blatant theft, how do you assess the potential risks for European economies and EU countries if this proposal goes forward?
Again, a very, very good question, because the European economics of countries is not, their economies are not in a good position at all, and then you can argue that that's a strangulation of how the EU runs and how it deals with trade deals, and not being competitive even amongst the EU countries. This then is why also that President Trump has talked about more and more economic sanctions against Russia, looking at its ghost fleet of ships, because, as you and I have discussed a number of times over the last few weeks, and other people greater than me have said, that where Russia is getting its money to fight this war is from the energy sector. We have discussed, of course, the country of India buying oil. We look at what is happening with China, where it's going for the gas, and other countries. And that's why President Trump and more have said within Europe, as we are buying the energy off, but the European countries getting the energy off Russia, is turning around and saying, how do you turn that tap off? I mean, Hungary, which it does not have any border with any sea, no, it doesn't have a port, is then reliant on buying their energy from Russia as well, where they're talking about saying, well, we need another pipeline. And as you can appreciate, and they do cross at times in Ukraine, you can appreciate that countries are looking at, how do we keep our energy coming in, where do we go for it, and also we want this war to end. Assuma.
Yes. Thank you, Mark, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. A senior Russian lawmaker has told a Russian news agency that Russia's response to any possible supply of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine will be harsh and asymmetrical. He has emphasized that Russia knows how to shoot down Tomahawk missiles and warned that those who supply Ukraine with such weapons or use them will face serious consequences. Meanwhile, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov urged the U.S. to take a responsible approach regarding the possible transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. He further warned that the appearance of such weapons in Ukraine would represent a qualitative change in the security situation. He further has said that the initial momentum for a Ukrainian settlement after the Putin-Trump-Alaska meeting has ended. On diplomacy, Ryabkov announced Russia will impose travel restrictions on diplomats from unfriendly countries that restrict Russian diplomats' movement. While addressing arms control, Ryabkov further stated that Russia extended a hand to the U.S. with its proposal on the New START treaty. But if the United States is not interested in continuing this agreement, Russia will manage without it. Now for this discussion, we go back to Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you, Mark, for staying with us now, looking and hearing all this coming in from Russia. What's your reaction?
But again, I mean, this whole thing of nuclear proliferation is then on the table, where it's turning around and saying, "Can we'll have this we'll restart those negotiations, excuse the pun, and we'll sit down and have a discussion about the nuclear missiles there, and then, as you've said, and then." We're looking at Tomahawk missiles are then going into that theatre of war, and with the Russian comments saying, "Well, we will deal with that extremely strongly." We don't want to see escalation. Are we bordering on that? And also, with those with those Tomahawk missiles going out into the theatre of war or any other asset like that, on the European Ukrainian side, we are then turning around and going, well, look, we are being extremely serious in this regard. Whether they are used, that time will tell, and that's the last thing personally that I want to see. But remember that they have a minimum range of 1,000 miles. So words again, it's words. The Russians are turning around, as I've just said, without sounding repetitive. You move those into the theatre of war, we will then react, and at the same time, where Putin's going, well, okay, if you're going to play that, when we're about to maybe having a discussion in regard to the nuclear missiles, then what are you playing at? There is a mixed message that Putin may actually be saying to us, be saying to the Americans in this regard. Asuma.
With that, I would like to thank Mark Sutherland for joining us and staying with us and sharing that insight throughout this topic. Now we move on to Middle East. A senior Hamas official, Tahir al-Nunu, has described the negotiations in Cairo as progressing in a spirit of optimism. The talks are focused on ending the war, delivering aid, returning hostages, and releasing Palestinian security prisoners. Nunu has confirmed that both sides have exchanged lists of prisoners and hostages based on agreed criteria and numbers. Hamas is set to release 47 hostages seized during its October 7, 2023 attack on Israel in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Meanwhile, Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati has said that additional Arab countries could sign peace agreements with Israel if the war in Gaza comes to an end. He further added that U.S. President Donald Trump is the main guarantor for the success of the ongoing talks in Egypt. At the same time, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said that Turkey is advising Hamas on the future of a Palestinian state as part of President Donald Trump's plan to end the Gaza conflict. Erdogan has emphasized that Gaza must remain part of a Palestinian state and be governed by Palestinians. He further added that Turkey is ready to contribute to security efforts in the region. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Ali Muhammad Bushbak. He's an independent Palestinian researcher, joins us live from Cairo. Thank you, Ali, for joining us again. Good to see you. So far, what do we know about the ongoing negotiations? What is clear and what is not?
Thank you so much for having me. It's worth mentioning that now there is a indirect talk between the Israeli delegation and Hamas delegation in Sharm el-Sheikh. It's carrying now this time. So we hope that they will reach for a ceasefire, or they will reach for end the conflict in Gaza. According to several of media that leaked from that side, that there's two obstacles that in the negotiation and talk. Hamas want, first of all, guarantee that Israel is going to end the war. It's not going to resume the war again, and the ceasefire is not going to break the ceasefire like what we have seen during the 4th negotiation in mid of January, and suddenly Israel resumed the war in March. So Hamas, in this time, if Hamas is going to release the whole captive from Gaza, the strongest power and the most powerful card, it will lose to Hamas, and that Israel will bombard Gaza again without any consideration. So Hamas want insurance and want guarantee that Israel is not going to the war again. And this is one point. Second point, it's about the withdrawal from Gaza area. So Hamas want to ensure that Israel is going to withdraw, and about the point Israel will take it or it will be stay in. So these things, these two obstacles up to now, it's not solved. Despite the all media, they consider it as a positive atmosphere. But here's also, but also worth mentioning that Osama on the ground, the day when Hamas respond positively with regard Donald Trump 21 points of peace and proposal. He called Donald Trump. He called for immediate halt the military operation in Gaza. But today is the fourth day of the call of Donald from the call of stop the war and stop the militant operation in Gaza. Despite that, Israel is continuously bombarding Gaza, all Gaza Strip, and still the airstrike and artillery shield and naval from Israel still bombardment Gaza. Daily we are hearing 100 civilians have been killed and as casualties from Gaza City. Israel is still seizing some area from Gaza City. So that will make the situation more difficult to solve. I'm not optimist up to now because on the ground there is nothing clear, and Israel's, and we have seen that Benjamin Netanyahu's statement. He said that in next phase after Hamas is going to release the hostages, Hamas should be lie down its weapon. If it's not going to lie down its weapon, that in peaceful way that we are going to resume the war and we will make it under the militant pressure. So these things make it a question mark about the intention of Benjamin Netanyahu after releasing the hostages. Also, the list of the Palestinian prisoner in Israeli jail, there is Hamas stressed, and there is three characters for Hamas should be released and be in this list. First of all, Marwan al-Barghouti, one of the leader and senior leader of Fatah, and also Ahmad Saadat, one of the senior Palestinian leader. So Israel considered both of them as a red line that in every time, in every negotiation or a change the prisoner, Hamas used to put these two names on. There is one oldest Palestinian prisoner in Israeli's jail. Both these three names up to now, Israel is considered as a red line. So this is the obstacles that facing the negotiation and the talk between Hamas and Israel. We are hoping also in Israeli media, they are considering symbolic things that the negotiation transformed from Qatar to Egypt, and we are witnessing we are presenting nowadays the anniversary years of 6th of October, between the war between Israel and Egypt, when Egypt freed the Sinai area. So they consider the time and the area has a symbolic message to the Israel, and they are fueling and mobilizing the Israelis audience against this negotiation. Most probably knows who's taking benefit from this kind of hate speech on Israeli media, Smotrich and Bennett Peer. Both of them, they don't want to this war end and for their benefit and for personal benefit. As I mentioned, on the ground, the situation is still incredible, and still the Israelis' bombardment is still ongoing. There is no atmosphere, positive atmosphere from Israeli side about their serious with regard to reach to the ceasefire or to reach to that plan. Peace plan.
Yes, Ali, with that, I would like to thank you for joining us and sharing that insight and giving us all the updates on the situation in Middle East. Thank you very much. Now we move on to North America. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi has appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Bondi has faced the committee over the alleged witch hunt of federal employees in the United States. She has said that she took office with two goals: to end the weaponization of justice and to return the Department of Fighting Crime She has said that in the past 8 months, the Justice Department has made tremendous progress towards these goals. Now, Pam Bondi has also been questioned on the matter of the deployment of National Guards in Chicago. She has stated that the Trump administration and the Guards are working to protect citizens. Let's in fact listen into what the Attorney General has said.
Yeah, Chairman, as you shut down the government, you voted to shut down the government, and you're sitting here, our law enforcement officers aren't being paid. They're out there working to protect you. I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate President Trump. And currently, the National Guard are on the way to Chicago. If you're not going to protect your citizens, President Trump will. Right now as we speak. Oh, by the way, so is Director Patel and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. You're sitting here grilling me, and they're on their way to Chicago to keep your state safe.
Now, question on the Justice Department's reversal on releasing the Epstein files. Bondi has accused Democratic senators of accepting campaign donations from an Epstein associate. Bondi has also been questioned about her handling of former FBI Director James Comey's case. This comes days after the Justice Department brought charges against the former FBI Director of lying to Congress in 2020. Comey is set to make his first court appearance this week. Now, for this discussion, we go back to Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Now, Mark, looking at U.S., Trump administration is under a lot of fire. Also, looking at this news just coming in from Pam Bondi, what do you think is next for Trump administration? How do you think moving forward they can get back trust of the citizens of U.S. on the administration, and what do you think is next for this administration?
There are many citizens in the United States, remember, that actually voted for President Trump last November. There are many citizens that fully support him, and what we've got is an ideological battle. That is what is going on. You have many people. If you look at people like Trevor Loudon and writing wonderful books like The Enemies Within, and The Enemies Within under the Obama regime as well, you have an ideological battle. This is people that don't believe in America and then what it stands for. This ideological battle has been going on for a long time, and it is called the radical left and Marxism and communism, and that is what is going on. And the Trump administration is also deeply concerned about that and the attack on American values, and the fact that people voted to deal with that, voted to then build the wall. We then have to go back to January 6th when people accuse why Pam Bondi et al., why are you going in to clean house? Because she's deeply concerned about the weaponization of the justice system. And in my opinion, those concerns are justifiable, especially when you look at Jan 6 and the fact that 1,500 people were then arrested for then taking their constitutional rights on that day to say we question what happened in the election of 2020. That has ramifications now, because people with an ideological viewpoint, you only have to look back in the past at Nancy Pelosi explaining how you smear your opposition. Also, Maxine Waters going, we need to get in the face of people who are against our political ideology and really push that. That's what's going on. But also, just finally, when you then have a breakdown in law and order, which is something that President Trump profoundly disagrees with and is asking the states to deal with that. We only have to look at the goings on with California, plus looking at the illegal immigration. I mean, we could argue that 11 million illegals have come over, and then you could argue could even be up to 50 million. when you're looking at wonderful and informative documentaries made by people like J.J. Carroll. This is where we're at. It's an ideological fight, and the Democrats, who are still absolutely furious that Trump won, no matter what legality of operation they then had to go at him. You then go back in regard to what you were saying about Comey, and you go Russia, 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 all the accusations that would then come out of Hillary Clinton's mouth, and then go when she's addressing Americans and calling them, you know, a basket of deplorables. This fight has, in recent times, has been going on since 2008. But you can easily argue that this fight, just a bit further, has been going on from the 50s. And then if you then look historically even more, you then have to go to Ted Roosevelt and say that this fight has been going on over 125 odd years. It's about a fight, in their terms,
Yes.
for the free world and ideologically what America stands for. Asuma.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Mark Sutherland, for joining us and sharing that insight throughout this topic. Now we move on to Europe. Former French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe has called for an early presidential election after French President Emmanuel Macron's government faces a political crisis. In an interview, Philippe, who served as Macron's first prime minister from 2017 to 2020, has said that Macron should wait until the 2026 budget is approved before calling for new elections. Philippe, now leader of the centrist Horizons party, has stressed that Macron should not resign immediately, but must appoint a new prime minister to ensure government's functionality. After passing the budget, he has said an early election would be necessary to resolve the country's political impasse. This comes after the resignation of Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu, the third to step down in a year amid a failed coalition and a hung parliament. Philippe joined other former allies, including Gabriel Attal, in expressing disillusionment with Macron's leadership. Let's listen into what he has said.
On ne contraint pas le président de la République à partir. Je ne suis pas pour sa démission immédiate et brutale. Elle aurait un impact terrible. Elle interdirait une élection présidentielle qui se passe dans de bonnes conditions. Mais je crois qu'il doit prendre une initiative. Et il me semble qu'il s'honorerait si par exemple, il proposait un nom de Premier ministre, il nommait un Premier ministre avec pour fonction d'exécuter les affaires courantes et de construire un budget, de faire adopter ce budget. Et qu'à l'issue, dès lors que ce budget est adopté, dès lors que la France est dotée d'un budget, et c'est indispensable, il annonce qu'il organise une élection présidentielle anticipée, c'est-à-dire qu'il part immédiatement après que le budget...
Now we move on and we stay in Europe. Spanish emergency services have recovered the bodies of 4 people from beneath the rubble of a 6-story building that collapsed in central Madrid while being refurbished into a hotel yesterday. The victims have been identified as 3 men aged between 30 to 50 from Ecuador, Mali, and Guinea-Conakry, and were employed at the site as construction workers. And the last victim is identified as a 30-year-old woman, the renovation project's architect. In a search and rescue operation in which police and firefighters deployed drones and sniper dogs, their remains were found nearly 15 hours after the collapse of the building's interior structure that has left its facade intact. Now we move on to our next news. U.S. gold futures surged past the $4,000 per ounce milestone for the first time on Tuesday, driven by expectations of a Federal Reserve rate cut later this month and persistent safe haven demand due to the ongoing U.S. government shutdown. Meanwhile, China's central bank added gold to its reserves in September for the 11th straight month. Also, Goldman Sachs has raised on its December 2026 gold price forecast to $4,900 per ounce from $4,300, citing strong Western exchange traded fund inflows and likely central bank buying. This is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.